In my last woodshed video, I asked for comments on my doors. I'm grateful and honored that people actually responded, either posting in the comments section or emailing me directly. In fact, multiple architects sent me extensive commentary, which I found hugely helpful. I learned about some of the mechanical principles that go into door construction. I thought I'd pass along what I picked up from these conversations. This video will focus on how to build swinging gates and doors to resist sagging and twist. I'll talk about how I revised my woodshed doors based on viewer feedback. So buckle in, we're going to do some science. Most garden gates and shed doors have some sort of frame that supports wooden planks or metal sheets. Viewers sent me images and sketches of different types of construction commonly used on garden gates. This led to a conversation about joinery. One approach is to use butted joints with the vertical ends flush with the top and bottom edges. This configuration is relatively weak. Here you'll see what happens with one of my hinges in the top corner. 3 screws go through the vertical support and only 1 screw goes through the horizontal support. That leaves the horizontal member poorly supported. In my doors, there'll be a gusset holding the horizontal member up, but I don't want to rely solely on that flimsy little gusset to keep the doors from sagging, so I decided not to go with this configuration. A second approach involves butted joints with the horizontal ends flush with the left and right edges. Again, let's see what happens with the top hinge. Here the horizontal support gets all 4 screws, so it's nicely supported, but the vertical support is completely detached from the top hinge. This configuration has poor torsional rigidity. If you grabbed the top corner of the door and opened it suddenly, the bottom corner would wag. Sure, there's a gusset holding the vertical and horizontal members together, but a twisting motion could make the screws pull out from the plywood. So I didn't go with this configuration. A third option is half-lap joinery, where you cut a notch in the vertical and horizontal supports so the ends can overlap. Let's see what happens with the top hinge. All 4 screws go through the horizontal member, so it's well supported, and 3 of the screws also go through the vertical member. The door structure moves as a unit, so it's strong and rigid. Cutting half-laps adds a lot of work to my shed, especially because I'm planning to make 14 doors, but I decided it's worth it. I'll make a separate video showing how I pulled this off. One recommendation was to line the inside of the door with plywood, effectively making an inner shear wall. This would greatly increase the sag resistance and torsional rigidity of my doors. I definitely would have gone with this option, but the cost of plywood is prohibitive for my budget because I'm looking at making 14 doors. An alternative would be to go with the gussets in the corners, which would be a lot cheaper but less structurally sound. Ultimately, I decided to stick with the gussets, but I came up with a way to supplement them. I'll talk about that in a bit. This particular conversation got into the structural mechanics of cross bracing, and here's where I learned about compression and tension. I knew a bit about these concepts from tree cutting, but I'd never applied them to structural design. One possibility would be to place a diagonal brace with the top end closest to the top hinge. When the door tries to sag, the diagonal member would be pulled into tension because those corners of the door are pulled away from each other. In my doors, I'm using a 2x3 stud as a cross brace. A 2x3 would have excellent tensile strength under tension, and I wouldn't have to worry about it bowing because it would be pulled straight. My main concern here is that all of the weight above the diagonal member would be held up from below, which would leave this top corner unstable and prone to flopping around. Another concern is that the diagonal brace would be held in place only by the gussets in the corners. There's a chance that the screws would pull through the 3/8 inch plywood when the diagonal is under tension. Consequently, I decided not to place the diagonal brace in this orientation. Another possibility would be to run the diagonal brace with the top end opposite the hinge side. In this configuration, the diagonal brace supports the top horizontal member, and the entire weight of the door hangs down from the horizontal piece. Gravity would tend to keep things in line. As an added bonus, the diagonal would be held in place not only by the screws and the gussets, but also by being wedged in these corners. As the door sags, these corners would tend to squeeze together, exerting a compressive force on the diagonal brace. The downside is that the 2x3 would be prone to bowing and distortion under compression. Due to these drawbacks, I came up with a third option, which is an X-brace configuration rather than a Z-brace. I'll place the diagonal with the top end opposite the hinge side to bear the compression, and then I'll run a strip of plywood in this orientation to bear tension. My hope is that the X-bracing will be sufficient to minimize sagging while providing sufficient torsional rigidity. I think this will be an adequate substitute for a full inner shear wall. Again, I want to thank the viewers who took the time to provide feedback. The comments were really helpful. Do you have your own comments or tips about gate construction? Please let me know in the comments section.